It was said that the dominion of man was from the land to the seas, and from the rivers until the ends of the earth, and it was true. Man had started their journey on the land, and when there was no more land to conquer, they looked towards the sea and searched for more. That was the basic story, the legacy that mankind would leave for those that came after. Find something, grow bored, and then move on and find something else. In the end, the final line of the prophecy came true as well. When we'd exhausted the land, and the seas, and all the natural resources we could extract, we arrived at the ends of the earth. There were rumours that the planet used to be covered with green, that there were rainforests bursting with life. Whether the rumours were true or not, it certainly wasn't the case anymore. There was no water, no trees, and no hope. When it became clear that our home planet was no longer viable for the future, man did what man did best. We moved on and searched for something else. It was sometime around the year 39 that the world's leading scientist had located a planet with similar atmospheric readings to Earth. This information was kept from the public, but underground scientific organisations around the world had begun recruiting volunteers almost immediately after the discovery. 5 volunteers were selected, those with a background in science rather than superstition that had become so common. Superstition wasn't about to save the human race from extinction, but the explorers just might. In the end, the future of the species came down to faith. Either we could have faith in myth and folklore, or we could have faith in the numbers and the combined research of millions throughout history. Whichever we chose, the outcome would be the same. Either we would succeed in creating a future for the species, or we wouldn't, and the human race would become extinct like so many species before us. It just so happened that rockets didn't run on myth and folklore. The flight was planned, and it was one way. The explorers, along with the fertilized embryos in cryogenic preservation, were the last hope for the future of the human race. It all came down to this. Faith was all well and good, but only if there was something out there to have faith in. Otherwise, what was the point? As the human race looked over the brink at complete oblivion, the final act that we would possibly ever declare into the universe was a leap into the unknown. The ship launched in the year 39, and as the explorers looked down upon the planet that the human race had called home for thousands of years, they wished its inhabitants a peaceful trip into the night, and fired their engines. With the invention of near light-speed travel a couple of decades prior, the journey was only supposed to take a year to complete. The explorers settled down into their cryosleep chambers, and the onboard computer took full control of navigation. They could have stayed awake and piloted the ship themselves, but with the risk so great and the stakes so high, the computer was the safer option this time. The computer watched over the crew as they slept, checking their vital signals, and kept the ship on course through space. It was an easy journey and remarkably light on resources. The computer used spare processing power to record scientific data in its memory banks. They arrived 370 days after launching from Earth. The computer awoke the crew, and they looked at each other with hope, which was something that none of them had felt in a long while. It was a good feeling, something pure and innocent, rather than the constant bleakness they'd become accustomed to. It clung to everything and was impossible to remove. Now that they'd arrived at this new world, it was like a weight had been lifted. It was a younger world, newly born, and if the readings were correct, then this was the haven in the stars that the human race had been looking for. The explorers gathered around the readout and analysed the data the computer had collected. The world was barren. It was a dead, empty wasteland. The readings had been miscalculated, and humanity had made a dire mistake. The hope that had so quickly flooded their hearts evaporated, and they were unsure of what to do. On the opposite side of the galaxy to home, the last option for the survival of the species was no longer viable. Faith had gotten them here, but it seemed that even faith had a limit on what it could achieve. With no other options left, the computer charted a course for Earth, and the explorers set off back home. None of them went back into cryosleep on the way back. With humanity only having a limited time left, they thought it best that they were at least conscious to experience as much as they could before time ran out. So the explorers aged another year, and they arrived back on Earth. Even an entire year wasn't enough time to think about how they would break the news that there was no plan B for the human race. It turned out they didn't need to. You see, in the whirlwind of excitement and promise that was created on the discovery of this new world, nobody really thought about what would happen should the explorers need to return. Besides, with near light-speed travel, it would only take them another year to return to Earth anyway, if they needed to. What they didn't take into account, however, was time dilation. The faster something travels through space, the greater the time dilation is between the traveller and the observer. The observer would notice that the faster the traveller is moving, the slower time would appear for them. This effect continues until the speed of light is reached, where time slows down to 0. For our brave explorers travelling at near light speed, the time taken for the journey was just over a year. But for the observer on Earth, well, that was a different story entirely. The explorers touched down, expecting to see the familiar faces of the scientists that had planned their mission. Instead, they were greeted with nothing and no one. The Earth was dead. Even though the explorers were only 2 years older since their mission started, millions of years, if not longer, had passed on Earth. Their mission, the mission of humanity, had failed. With nowhere to call home, the explorers once again launched into space, unsure of their destination. The last humans left were adrift in the universe, and all they had left was faith. They went back into their cryosleep chambers, and didn't particularly care whether the computer woke them up again.